It's a little hard to identify Kevin on this thumbnail because the AI tool on Photoshop won't put actual faces of real people on other bodies, so I have to manually add their heads on the bodies when I make these. Since Kevin's looking down at the chessboard, it made this one a little difficult. I scoured his Instagram to the point I started to feel like a creep, but there doesn't exist a photo where this man is not smiling. He always looks so happy, just like you would expect. Anyway, distorting a happy face to a frown is no easy task. But for ID purposes, since you can't really tell, that's supposed to be him moving the pawn on the chessboard. Standing behind him, of course, Brian Friedman and my idol, Miss Ellen. And to the right are the foolish games that all the other law firms are playing with the docket. The distinction between the Wayfarer filings and everyone else involved has only grown over time, and time after time, Wayfarer's cool, non-hysterical responses to some pretty outrageous claims and bashing that's come up against them time after time, especially in the last few days, has elevated my opinion of them even more, if that's even possible. But truly, leaps and bounds ahead. It couldn't be more evident, specifically in this response to the Isabela nonsense. That document that had us all raging angry when we read the ridiculousness of it all. I had in mind that they would come back with receipts on all of the outrageous claims that were leveled against them. But they had an even better response than I ever could have imagined. They start off by calling that wretched document exactly what it was. An inappropriate attack upon Mr. Baldoni and his counsel. They point to an order on August 8th, docket 581, and this of course was the order where after some colorful language was put on the docket, Judge Lyman addressed it and said that all individuals filing documents in the case shall not in any submission to this court use language that is disrespectful of the parties, their counsel, or the court. And the words that were used, as you saw, everyone who talked about that document was in agreement, were beyond unprofessional. It moves on to letting us know that the whole reason why Isabela was subpoenaed in the first place was because of Blake's initial disclosures. Now, if you'll remember way back at the beginning of the case, when discovery was first about to open up, I had explained to you with the scheduling order what the different steps would be and what some of those documents would be. This was the one that I showed you would include a list of names and each side would have to present it, but it was a list of the potential witnesses that they might be using in the case. It's the most basic discovery. It's just the names and, importantly, their contact information. So their phone numbers, their addresses. The reason for that is if a person is on the witness list, opposing counsel gets a chance to what? To subpoena them or depose them, because those witnesses are the ones they are going to have to be ready for and have a defense against on behalf of their client. That means, and we can see from the little bit that they intentionally left out of redaction, Isabela was on Blake's list, and Blake is the one who provided the address to the court and to them in order to find her. So this lays the blame directly to Blake, because if you put this person in your list of witnesses, you are supposed to provide their contact information. So once again, they're being blamed for harassing, but this is all Blake's fault. Obviously, and the court will see this. This is so reminiscent of what happened with Taylor Swift. Blake is also the reason that Taylor Swift was ever brought into this case. Blake directly said in text messages that she was her dragon. She said that she's the reason Isabela was hired, so it looked like she was involved in important decisions of the movie. She also made claims with Taylor Swift about the music. And then when these people are given a subpoena, because of Blake involving them, Blake's team turns around and says, "You're harassing these women." And, of course, puts it all out there in the media for everyone to join in and say, "Oh, harassing another woman." It's disgusting, and it's so despicably low, especially in light of the document asking for sanctions against Brian Friedman. And we're going to cover that in the next episode. But the hypocrisy has just been outrageous in this case. They really don't have a big variety in their nasty bag of tricks. In the next paragraph we learn that Blake subpoenaed her back in February, We had gathered that from the last document from Isabela's attorneys, and now it's confirmed. And as he says, importantly, presumably they accepted service of the subpoena. Somebody did, because we know that Blake already has her documents. How do we know that? Because in the second one, and this is something I said in the episode about this letter, that what the Wayfarer parties would want from Isabela would be completely opposite to what Blake would want. Naturally. And so this wouldn't be a situation where they could simply share discovery. And it makes me wonder, was this an attempt to block access? If this happened in February, Isabela was one of the very first people that Blake subpoenaed. Remember, there was a big lag in the beginning of discovery because there was a bunch of arguments over this and that before it really got started in earnest. So if Blake did this back in February, that was a really big jump on everything else. So she went to get this from her first, immediately. And it makes me wonder, was this intentional? Did she intend to do this and then say, well, we already have her discovery, just we have to share this? Did she, in order to get Isabela's cooperation, give her a false sense of protection? Well, if I get it from you first, he has to use mine. That's complete speculation, but it's definitely a possibility, because that's what they're trying to do. They hinted at it in the last document, because we know that in some of these cases they are sharing discovery. And we see that here in green in July 2025, the Wayfarer party subpoenaed Ms. Ferrer for documents that she either neglected to produce or were not requested by Ms. Lively's subpoena. And they mention again that they've requested for Isabela's attorneys to accept service. As they mention, and as I said, it's a common professional courtesy. It's a very common way to deliver subpoenas when someone's already represented by counsel. They mention again, they likely granted Blake's request, but yet ignored the Wayfarer's request, and instead prepared and filed, I love the word robust in these situations, a robust opposition, which they put in quotes, because it really wasn't that, as they say in the green, most of which does not pertain to service. We know what the purpose of that document was. Everyone who looked at it knows the purpose of that document. And they say the same thing I did. In all those 23 pages, they never explained why they're refusing to accept service. Another thing they didn't explain is why Isabela is so reticent to testify, and that's a fair question. And the biggest piece of shade that made me literally laugh out loud the first time I read it is that he seems more focused on it ends with us purported contractual obligation to indemnify Miss Ferrer and cover his fees. How much of that letter, that robust opposition, had to do with this indemnity? So much. And then they say, ironically, Mr. Mickelman's actions have unnecessarily increased those fees by creating issues where none should exist. And that's exactly right. There's no way in this world Isabela was not going to get subpoenaed. No motion to quash would have stood up in court because she was there. She was a cast member. She had one opinion of Justin in the beginning. Then after befriending Blake and being seen with her over and over again during the marketing and personally, after which she shunned Justin, unfollowed Justin, was part of the crew who said we will not be at the premiere. If you allow him there, send him, his family, his guests, everyone with him to the basement. Disgusting behavior, by the way, Isabela. Shame on all of you. They do address some of the claims in there, but I love that they didn't even feel the need to defend everything. They're just like, dude, you're way out of line. You're going against a court order here. You're handing things over to one side, refusing to the other side. You're not giving reasons to do this. But he does address this, because this is at the actual heart of the matter about serving a subpoena, that they suggested that the Wayfarer parties were not diligent in their efforts to serve her, but should have reached out to Miss Ferrer's talent agent or conducted a skip trace, which is a method that bounty hunters use. And the response is so classic and good. He goes, naturally, we deemed Miss Ferrer's counsel and not her talent agent as the appropriate person with whom to communicate concerning the subpoena. I mean, what are you going to say to that? If someone has an attorney, that's the most direct route when you can't serve them in person. Not tracking down a talent agent or conducting a bounty hunter type method. You just give it to their attorney. And the other part they address is kind of mentioned earlier. We assure the court the two addresses at which service of the subpoena was attempted were not derived out of thin air. And they just showed us on the first page that it came from Blake's initial disclosures. It was Blake's responsibility to have provided the court with the appropriate address, and that will not be lost on the judge. And with more shade, we are happy to share the results of our due diligence with the court, albeit that seems unnecessary given that Miss Ferrer has counsel who has now appeared. 10-1, even this judge is going to say, accept the subpoena. Another allegation they address is that attempting this personal service after her lawyer refused to accept service on her behalf, Mr. Baldoni is harassing Miss Ferrer and attempting to draw her deeper into litigation and disputes that she has done her best to avoid. And this claim is absolutely ridiculous. And it goes to the footnote that says, in inflammatory fashion, the opposition uses the word harass over a dozen times. Remember, we talked about that they wanted to connect Isabel's name to Justin's name with these specific words, and that's why they kept being repeated. And I love that this gets mentioned. Over a dozen times. There's no call for that, because this isn't harassment. And they mention it again. It was not the Wayfarer parties who first subpoenaed Miss Ferrer. It was Miss Lively. And point out to the fact that, once again, that obviously her attorney accepted service, or she herself accepted service. And they point out, and this is very true, Miss Lively should not be permitted to obtain discovery from Miss Ferrer, while Miss Ferrer and her counsel frustrate all effort by the Wayfarer parties to obtain the discovery critical to the preparation of their defense. No court, not even this court, is going to allow that to happen. And then comes the move that nobody saw coming. Nobody. Given the circumstances, the Wayfarer parties are willing to stipulate that none of the parties will use any communication to, from, or concerning Miss Ferrer, or any testimony from her in any manner in this action. They're saying, fine, we'll accept she doesn't want to be a part of this, but then Blake doesn't get to use her either. That stipulation will satisfy Miss Ferrer's apparent desire to avoid involvement in the litigation and trial. If the other parties decline to enter into such a stipulation, and Miss Ferrer and her counsel continue to resist service, the court should enter an order excluding Miss Ferrer as a witness and excluding the use of any communication to, from, or concerning Miss Ferrer in any manner in this action. So, if Blake wants to use her, Blake's now got to stand up to the court and say, we intend to use her as a witness. Then it will become very clear who's drawing her into this litigation. So all of this media being put out there blaming it all on Justin will be proven wrong, and it will all fall to Blake. That's why this is such a genius move. And Isabela will also know, this is all Blake, the reason I'm being drug into this. And they mentioned that if she thinks that this subpoena's overbroad, she can object to it. We've seen that happening since the very beginning when Blake's team tried to get a ridiculous amount of information from Wayfarer's phones. And as far as this ridiculous accusation of a quid pro quo, they address that too, saying a point that dispels any ludicrous notion of a quid pro quo. And so they say, if she's going to be used, the court should grant this alternative means to serve her subpoena. So that backfired really good, didn't it? Like I said, Wayfarer is playing chess. Everyone else is just playing Candyland.